joining us today and joining Robert in this discussion about trends in digital democracy is Michael Grenetz. And Michael is the former grassroots coordinator for the Sierra Club and is now the head of digital innovation, I believe it's called, which is means quite a bit because in terms of digital democracy, they are leaders. So these folks, the RSLC plays in hundreds of races in a typical election cycle. And they assist candidates in many different ways across the country. The Sierra Club supports not only its national efforts, but efforts in all their chapters in all 50 states. And so, although these guys come at many issues from a very different perspective, and although the organizations they work for are very different, what they both have is that sort of mix of the national perspective and the local perspective, and a pretty good understanding of the tools that have existed, do exist, and what are trends. And again, it was a conversation between two real leaders in this field of digital democracy, and I'd please like to give a warm welcome to Robert Sechrist and Michael Grenetz.
Well, thank you for that, Phil. That was very nice of you. Well, Michael has prepared a presentation, and we'll let him go through that and talk, and I'll poke and prod him when necessary.
How you doing, everybody? Michael Grenetz. I live in Seattle, and I also co-founded NetSquared Greater Seattle, which brings technologists and nonprofits together. And that's okay. And on any kind of issues they want to work on, it's not partisan or based or anything. And so I was really interested when I heard about this and thought it would be a really interesting thing to engage the community. Actually, someone who comes from the NetSquared is here today, so I was really excited to see him. And, I care deeply about democracy and citizen engagement, and over the years gotten more involved in the idea and the practice of digital democracy, and I wanted to share with you some of my thoughts about it from kind of my vantage point. So, let's see this. I gotta turn it on. Story of my life. Let's see. There we go. So, does anyone know who this guy is? Martin Luther. So, it's been almost 500 years. I think it'll be 500 years in 4 years since a young priest tacked 95 theses to the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany. Or is that Wittenberg? I don't know. At that point, all you could do is, at best, put paper to pen, write something. In this case, couldn't email it. He had to nail it. And if your ideas were provocative enough, exciting enough, it would take a very long time, but eventually people would read it and be moved by it. We don't have to do that anymore. We can travel, our information can travel at the speed of light in many cases, thanks to fiber optics. And the ability to communicate, to act, to be engaged happens in a way that was unprecedented in history. So, first thing I want to talk about, and let's see if I can read that. This is a quote from someone who works in digital democracy. It says, "Our work connects movements that seem really disparate, but actually are about the same thing. People want agency over their lives and to be able to influence the halls of power, even when they themselves are not the powerful." I think that kind of speaks for all of us in some way or another, unless there's really, really powerful people here. I don't know. And I apologize to you, overlords and whatnot. And so digital democracy is this idea that technology can be really transformative, it can be positive. I mean, like anything, it can also be negative, but I want to focus on the more optimistic aspects. And the idea is that when people have an interest in current politics, or in their community or in their lives, they have the ability now to access all the information, to learn about it, to learn what's going on in a way that, 15 years ago, I got a paper in the mail, and I had to wait for it to come in and read it. And if I wanted to learn about something else, now, there's all these horror movies that I never wanted to watch, but I want to know what happened. I go on Wikipedia. It's amazing. And the endings are usually pretty disappointing, unfortunately. And so you can learn about it. But then on top of that, you can now use online tools that are accessible to everyone who is online to organize, whether as individuals or organize as groups, and have a deeper impact in their community and in their state and in the nation and the globe. And it's a pretty exciting time. It's not, digital democracy isn't bound to a cause, it's not bound to a platform, it's bound to an ethos that we have these tools, let's use them, let's be members of our society. So, now, why is that more possible now than even 5-10 years ago? The concept of digital divide is that for a long time there was two very distinct communities, those who were online and those who weren't. And today that's not really the case. In fact, globally it's less and less the case. There's people in Haiti and in war-torn areas in Burma who are using smartphones to communicate about things that are going on and have real power. And but in the U.S. right now, actually it was 2012, July 2012, 4 out of 5 people are online in the U.S. Right? That's a lot. And not only that, but every year they're online longer. They're doing more with it. There's more going on. And as you can see, as each successive generation steps in, more and more people are online. Look at the difference between 12 to 17, 18, 29. It's almost the same. So as time goes on, those numbers will all move up there. So it's pretty exciting, and it's a powerful moment. So I want to talk a little about some examples of digital democracy, some maybe that you haven't heard of. So on the upper left, that's a family in Minnesota who put pressure on Bank of America, only using social media and some video stories, and were able to prevent their foreclosure and were able to renegotiate. That's amazing. This woman lives in DC, and she's trying, actually right now, if you want to invest, is on Kiva, trying to raise $8,000 to start a small business, which would be a daycare business. That's kind of unprecedented. And on the bottom left, this guy really likes Tesla, and he raised $1.3 million to purchase Tesla's lab and start a museum. It was going to be destroyed. $1.3 million. People like Tesla. It's in all of our lives. These open tools that anyone can use, just getting more and more accessible. This is a university where they actually have an open petition tool to put pressure on their student government. The student government created it so they could hear. In this case, they're getting a petition started to get more storage space for their student societies. But it's just in everything. I hope they win. Need storage space. Causes is a great example. There's tons of these tools out there. Petition.com and sign on and change.org and on and on and on. Causes is, this is just a random snapshot that I pulled. You look at the bottom right, provide tornado shelters for schools and communities, asking people to sign in if they can do that. You know, or save public schools performing arts program. That's a local thing. I don't even know where there's, or there's a, Grant High School Japanese program they're trying to save, raise money for, and get public support. Anyone can do this. This is the mayor of Houston, clearly a cat lover, who was dismayed that the city council wasn't supporting the work to reduce regulation on food trucks, so there could be more food trucks in Houston. As someone who's spent some time in Austin, they have a really good food truck scene, and I think people are jealous. And so she actually came out on Twitter about it, and then all of a sudden there was an outpouring of support. People just didn't know. It was pretty powerful, and they have more food trucks. So this is the one that everyone thinks about, right? The big stuff, the $9 billion spent in 2012 on elections. And it is important. It'd be silly to pretend like it isn't. We all know, we're all here because elections matter and have consequences. And as you can see, it's changing the game. And so I want to talk about the technology divide. This is, once again, my thoughts and how I see things. And actually I spent some research last night really thinking about this and found folks in the Republican Party who think the same thing. So first of all, there's a divide of technology, that a difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, the progressive community and the conservative community, in large parts, and what technology they even are using and have accessible. So this is just some of the random stuff that I just pulled images of from the Obama campaign, right? Canvas, website tool, literally the most successful Reddit post ever, just the first time I got on. I don't even like Reddit, but that's still impressive. Sorry to Reddit people here. Like a thing that'll help you, ask you to confirm where you're going to vote, and then they had a whole tool set to make sure you turned out. Everyone knows about all the big data, and there were just an insane amount of tools as mentioned earlier this morning. And that's just like a small, oh, I have a laser. Let me see if that's that thing. That's just a small sampling of the team, the troop they had in Chicago that was working. It might have been selective here, but these are some of the things from the Romney side. A lot of my friends really enjoyed the bottom left one. You might notice there's a misspelling of a major app. It was the first thing they put out, Amartya. A guy, as a patriot, I try to always spell that right. I think they corrected it. Orca was supposed to be competitive with the data system that the Obama folks are putting out and help turn people out on the election day. It broke immediately and was a huge waste of resources. They had trained all the organizers on it. I mean, we don't know what the election impact was, but it was very bad. And then, I just look at this. So, how many employees were at LinkedIn in the Obama campaign? 1,900. 369 for Romney. How many donors? Grassroots donors. The Obama administration had 4.4, or Obama, campaign. Romney had 1.1. Email list. This is the biggest one, and this should explain why the donor base is so different. 16 million, and I'm sure it's still growing. Email list in the Obama folks, 2 to 3 million from Romney. That's a divide. That's an asset. That's a technology divide. But I don't want to get the car before the horse. Anyone? This is, once again, my perspective, and you're all welcome to not share it. But this is what I really think. There's a technologist divide. This is an article that came out this week. The Republican community is working on scaling up the technology. They go to Silicon Valley, no one wants to work for them. There's a technologist divide, that there are more technologists who want to work for one side than the other. It's just real, and you can't build technology unless you have a huge community of technologists. And let me give you some data that I pulled out last night. And this is 11:30, so I hope I'm right about this. In 2012, Barack Obama beat Mitt Romney by 42% or percentage points in Santa Clara County, right, which is Silicon Valley. 42 points. And then, of course, it should be less surprising that he beat Romney in county of San Francisco by 71-point margin, which is even higher than I expected. But that's not the full story. He drew on reservoir wealth in Silicon Valley and talent. Nate Silver, who became pretty famous end of last election cycle for being pretty darn close to the turnout and for the election as statistician, he said that Obama picked up an overwhelming share of contributions from tech community employees. Let me give you a sense of it. 90% of donations from Google, Apple, and Netflix went to Obama. 90%. I mean, those are just numbers. That's a divide. That's shocking, quite frankly. Almost all those people came from the elite of Facebook, of Google. They all came to work for him on his campaign for years, building all this technology. They're in this space. They've come through it, and they know this field. And, I found this quote. Karl Rove was asked to define a Democrat in 2003. And whether he was saying this to be snide or not, I don't know, but I thought it was telling. He said, a Democrat is somebody with a doctorate, the information class, right? That's not a good place to start. Either whether he's talking about the demographics or he's talking about the fact that there are these other people, it's not a good place to be. I also found this other thing that I thought was interesting. a lot of the folks in technology come out of the science world. They're data scientists, they're engineers. Only 6% of scientists identify as Republicans, and whereas 55% identify as Democrats, and the rest are independents. It's a pretty large swath, but still. In October of 2012, 68 Nobel-winning scientists signed a strong endorsement for Obama. That's a lot of Nobel Prize-winning scientists. I had no idea. So what I would say is that, this is data, these are real numbers, and the question is, how do you bring in technologists? How do you create a community that they want to be part of? Because I am confident there's a lot of technologists who have the same values, the same feelings about the direction of the economy and all those things that I might feel differently about, but they're with you, and why aren't they here? So, what was I going to say next? So I'm going to help give you my opinion, and I think this is good. I think this revolution's happening on the left, and I think it's starting to happen on the right, and I think it's good for everybody. The arrow that will point you to what I think will be getting more technology that deepens democracy and empowers y'all. So, does anyone know who this guy is? Anyone? Well, yeah, the guy on the left, sure. That was easy. The guy on the right is the digital director for Senator Cruz. And he said, simply hiring someone from Silicon Valley for the sake of it won't fix the issue. It's one that will take time and a fundamental shift in the culture of the hierarchical structure of the GOP. One of the most important aspects of the information age, of the new media environment, is an opening, a transparency of data, flattening of hierarchy, letting more people make more decisions. I think the Tea Party is one of the actually most powerful examples of networked community, where discrete folks are making the right decisions for them in that community, and it's having massive impacts on the political stage. Whatever you would say about it, this guy is saying that needs to happen and hasn't. And here's another fella. I always get his name, Ryan Priebus, anyone, something like that. He put on, they did this huge, extremely long process to review what went wrong. And one of the elements he said is you need a culture of data. And so I also want to talk about what does that mean. You got to flatten, you got to open, you got to let more people in, be more part of it, empower larger groups of people. But what is the other part, the culture of data mean? I wouldn't test that, but I'm sure it'll be a delicious experiment. One is you test everything, and you keep what works and you throw away the rest. You challenge all conventional wisdom. Let me give you an example. Robocalling. I think if you tested it a lot, you probably wouldn't do it anymore. Unless you want to, depress turn on the other side, of course. Test everything. Get results. Look at metrics. Really explore everything that you do, top to bottom. If you ever hang out with an engineer, it's been my experience that they will not let you get away with a single statement. That's the culture, and it can be frustrating, but it's the pathway to truth and the pathway to move forward. Be smart. When you test everything, be smart about it. Let me give you an example of what not to do. Here's what not to do. Don't build an election tool for your presidential election and only test it on the day of. Right? That's not smart. What could they have done? They could have tested it to a really small community of folks who were interested in this, see what happened, run it through, and then they would have known that it was hardly broken. And then they could have had a decision. Do we iterate? Do we make it better? Or do we scrap it and go to what we normally do? Test everything, but test it small as possible. When I build a program at the club, I will find the smallest campaign, the smallest state, whatever, where it seems like, and the people are excited to do the test, and I'll test that technology, I'll test that theory, whatever. When I do an email, right, I send it to the smallest possible percentage, different subject lines or different message. And that way I'm not saying to everyone, I'm not wasting energy. And then when I get the best answer, I'll send that email to the larger group, and it's predictive. Data, love it. I'm sure there's a lot of you who spend a lot of time with spreadsheets and all that. Just a fact of life now. Measure everything. Get everything defined to a particular metric. Get into data. Dig deep. What else we got? This is what it looks like. This is the process. This is a process that every startup uses, every technologist uses. Get comfortable with it. Build, measure, learn, rinse and repeat forever. Forever. If you want to get better at whatever it is, whatever you want to see if your message doing better, you want to discover the truth of this or that. I think this is kind of like the story of my life, the quest for the best, whatever that is. It's the way that startup companies grow, right? They'll put out an early product, they'll get a bunch of first adopters, new folks who are into it, and then they'll see what data they get back, and then they'll keep developing new working theories. I don't know if you all know Second Life. It was this weird website. It was like Facebook, but it had like virtual reality people, and you could walk. It's like SimCity or something, where you could walk around and then talk to. I know it was, but it's really successful. But the company started. If you remember the days when there were all these different instant message. I mean, there still are, but there were a lot of instant message sites. There's AOL folks, and then there was folks who were on like the Hotmail version and all this stuff. These guys were trying to create one that would have them all be on one thing, which sounds like a good idea. But then in practice, no one actually wanted to use it. And they had this avatar thing on it. And that seemed to be the thing that people got excited about. So they kept iterating. And eventually they became like a enormous success. I mentioned this one, but you don't get to this without some of those things. In fact, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but they do all these x-rays now of famous works, and they'll see the different versions, which is pretty fascinating if you check it out. But iteration, right? Just keep trying. But there's nothing wrong with failure, but it should be planned failure. It shouldn't be failure, it should be learning. If something broke and you weren't, it's not on purpose, you weren't trying to find it, that's a bad failure. The failure should be like, let's test this if it works, let's test it as efficiently as possible, let's know what we're looking for, and then if it fails, it's just a test. Failing by accident, that's a problem. So it's my conjecture that if you had a culture of data that believes test everything, data, all those different factors, you add in the idea of open communities, this kind of new media environment that I think everyone's kind of growing into, but you add it into our organizations, into our institutions. I say take his word for it. It's winning formula. I think meme generator. It's the way to go. So that's.
Yeah, no, good job. 100% agree.
Yeah, agree.
I mean, you touched on a lot of important issues that I think the Republican Party is dealing with, but I do think that we're getting better and we are dealing with them. And the testing's a major thing that obviously Obama. I mean, like the "Hey" subject line that was the most widely opened email ever, or something like that. So it's that kind of stuff that I think is really important, and I think that we are getting better at. And yeah, I mean, like, look, when Phil first put us together, I was like, oh, this will be interesting. But I think we agree on a lot of stuff, on like where everybody's coming from and where everybody's going, and the challenges I think that are that everybody's in this room is probably dealing with, and to find the talent to help get us, get the ball further down the field. So I appreciate that. I don't have much to disagree with you on, other than I mean, some stuff. But we can talk about that later. The policy stuff that Phil won't let us talk about. But kidding, Phil. But yeah, no, I think we can open up to questions and whoever. Sure, I think there's her question is, how do you, these are all great ideas, but how do you get the Republican Party to actually embrace and implement them? I think that it has to happen two ways. I think it has to happen on a grassroots level, and I think it has to happen from the top down as well. And I think that we're at the beginning stages of it happening, but in both ways. And so I think that we're on the right track. I mean, this is a perfect example of a grassroots level thing happening, because people, you're here because you know the impact that these things can have on an election and how important that is, and you want to learn from people who have utilized their trades to get to win. And then, as we saw with the RNC report that came out, that they understand that data and all these technology tools are important as well. So I think it is happening from both. It's just, I think it takes time to shift paradigms, but I think that I think we're on the right track.
In my experience, the best way to make change is to lose. Not going to suggest whether you've done that or not lately, but okay, I didn't say anything. But failure definitely is a fertile ground for innovation. If it's not working, you want to fix it. And I think there's a lot of folks who are thinking about that across the board. And I can say that, I mean, look at either party. Anytime they have a sustained set of losses, they go through a lot, and they question everything, and they rejigger something until it works. They go through that process probably just not as efficiently as they could. So that's my take too. I think.
I'm Catherine Search from Square One Media Network. First of all, a brave man, thank you for venturing in amongst us. But I wanted to talk about the issue of the digital divide, because you've cited the data and the number of the tech and the things that are quantitative issues as opposed to qualitative. One of the things that I would contend is that we still have, even though more people are using technology and we've sort of erased the age, we have a divide that I find from experience in language. And those of us who are trying to do a lot of transpartisan work, we still use words very differently. And I'll give you a very quick example. In 2007, Prop 1 was the Roads and Transit proposition here in Puget Sound. And Sierra Club was partnered with those of us who are more conservative libertarian opposing it. But we were different reasons. So instead of us working together, for those of us who are honchoing the project, the Sierra Club and the center left worked separately, and we worked separately to our target audiences because we speak such different language, but we had a common goal. Now we're here 6 years later, and we're seeing some movement on that, but I'll give you a quick example. Is you're talking about democracy, and there are people in this room I know that cringe when you use the word democracy instead of we're a constitutional, republic. And so it's things like that we found. So I'm wondering if you're seeing any movement on that, or if what you think we can do to help jump over that divide with the language.
So the question is, what can we do? There's definitively some different language between communities, whether it's between tech and non-tech, between folks on the left and the right, and a lot of times there's different facts. People get media from different places, and how do we deal with that? It's a challenge. I had the experience of spending 3 years in a extremely strong Republican area in Southern California called Santa Clarita, just north of LA. Congressman Buck McKeon, longtime Republican congressman. He was at the time the chair of Education and Workforce Committee, very close with Congressman Boehner, and he had 1/3 of all potential wilderness and wild and scenic rivers in his district. And I work closely with his district director. I work closely with the community. I work closely with the chamber, because for them, this is about quality of life. It was a good issue to protect these places, to have them for their children and family. And so what I found was talk to people, build relationships, build trust, find things that you have in common, over time you find the shared language, you find the shared values. I have great friends there that normally wouldn't work on an environmental issue, but this was an area where we had common ground. And I think it's something that we need to have more dialogue. And as far as technology or non-technology, I think it's the same thing. Meet with these people, see what words they're using, try to figure out how to translate it. It's a process. I don't know that we're always going to have divided communities, but I think it's up to us that if we want to talk to them, if there's value, we plunge in.
Okay, just when you're asking questions, if you could keep the questions to about 30 seconds and phrase it in the form of a question. Okay, let's start here.
Hi, my name is David. My question is, you mentioned in the slide in your comments that 71% of the people with technology embraced conservatism in the last election.
Yeah.
Repeat
The question was, what could folks on the right side of the aisle, what could they do to get more support from technology community? Whether it's reaching out, using different language, finding the connections. So I actually think that I laid out some of that here from like the substantive side, as far as there is a challenge where, and I deal with this bringing together technologists and nonprofits on whatever it is, like with the YWCA, right? YWCA is a long existing organization with a huge national structure, lots of hierarchy. It's a tough place to innovate, and so if they want to bring in technologists, they need to flatten that out. They need to figure out ways to bring these people in, given the type of community where they're used to, where they can succeed, the type of structure, and the ability to innovate and do the things that they do every day in work and that they are passionate about. And I think that being data focused, being like just having that concept, I think speaks really strongly. So like that openness and that culture data, I really do think is a part of it. I'll leave to separate discussions about potentially looking at the differential in policy beliefs, but I think from that perspective, that's a huge chunk of it.
I do. I'll just say one thing to that. I think I totally agree with you about the. It's a lot of it has to do with us, the Republican willingness to embrace the new technologies and to remove these roadblocks to people that are good at this stuff and can implement and build and that sort of thing. So I think that's a big issue, and I agree with that comment.
Question?
So actually, this is a good time for me to address a couple of things about the structure of this organization. We'll get to the next question. One of the reasons that this is a center-right organization is that for those of us who've tried to engage in any technological innovation in the past few cycles, what we have consistently found is that political identification is pretty fluid in the tech community between folks who in one cycle, 1 year, consider themselves independent, 2 years later they're paleocons, it's back and forth, and their identity is fairly uniquely fluid in my experience. And so that's one reason we set this organization up as nonpartisan. And the second is, when you say partisan, everybody thinks, well, first of all, it's easy to understand. It's us versus them. Easy to understand. But the second thing is, people also think election cycle. And in this field, in the field of technology, most of the important work is being done on the off cycle. And so when we structured this, and at the end of the day, what's called the ask in this room, where you're going to hear about some organizations, including ours, talk about software products they need. Okay, there's 4 organizations, 3 of whom are offering to pay for the help they need, right? So you're hearing about business opportunities here. One of the asks is from us, and we're not just looking to connect Republican technologists with opportunities for Republican organizations. We're interested in helping libertarian techies find opportunities working with libertarian organizations. We have folks that are fiscally conservative but consider themselves independent. We're interested in connecting people who share our values with opportunities to use their skills on behalf of their values. And so I'm sorry to interrupt, and I'll take the next question, but that's why we exist. And this hand was up first, there in the red hat.
Addressing your over communities in the form of getting people involved. I talk to people in high tech who is in large companies. They're reluctant to get involved with another organization that's a top-down development situation. It's like the plague to them. They do not want to be in a top-down. The starfish and the spider and the starfish in that book is a class. It's like it's a cultural thing among techies. So I'm just wondering, what do you? Is that you feel that's more important? Is that what you're talking about with open communities? Not just users, but also the developers.
Again, I think that certainly there's merit in the criticisms of a top-down only approach, and I totally get that, and I don't think it will work. And that's what I was talking about earlier with the whole triangle of change. That you can do a critical mass, and that just kind of happens from both things happening, or both things, the top-down approach, being okay with it, and then the bottom-up demanding it. And I think that's the way to really implement change, and I think that's actually happening. So that would be my answer.
I think that when I pair nonprofits as technologists together, right? So just at a small organization through NetSquared, I often try to make sure that there's a commitment on the nonprofit's part to work with them in a way that's successful, that they understand the commitment they're making to that person and what they have to do to set them up for success. But then also the organization, getting this person in, the tech person, they often might come in with kind of this really optimistic idea of how things work in society and in their world, and I think it's important that they understand it. So I think that's actually, getting those two on the same page is really critical for any organization.
Okay, got a short question up here in the front, so we're going to jump in.
Yeah. On this data that you mine from, say, a biased community, give us a sense of how you apply that to change policy.
So, could you restate that a little bit? So how I would use the data to change policy?
Yeah, let's say certain data comes from a biased community.
Why don't you give me an example of say anything random?
Taking rapid transit, to Ohio County. Okay, they just don't want it, right? So there's a bias against it.
Yeah.
So give us a sense of how you apply the data you mine towards changing policy.
Okay. Well, I think there's a lot of ways to look at data. So I was at the Tableau presentation earlier, and I actually bike to work past their office, and I try to use it. I actually need to meet with that guy because it's really hard. I usually shake my fist. But this idea of visualizing data so you can understand it, I think is really important. It really depends on what you're trying to do. I think gathering data. So let me give you an example from my world, and feel free to not like it at all. It's totally fine. Mercury standards, right? There's a lot of science that says that 1 in 12 women have so much mercury in their bodies that their children could have neurological disorders, and it comes in primarily through fish, it stays in their fatty tissue stuff, and so we've done a lot of education around getting off of that for women, but also on the policy area. And so one thing that I've done working at a national organization is localizing the data. So for example, we created actually, let's do another one, smog. Okay, so there's all this data around asthma and how it's related, or heart attacks, or the cost for the community from missed days. So create localization where we'll send emails to different communities that are affected and tell them how it's affecting them and their community, people they probably know, and then to mobilize them. So it can be used to mobilize activists, because when it's local, when it's not, there's so much stuff, and both sides, it's like really big, hard to kind of put your finger on it, but when you're like, this is how it affects my community here, that's pretty animating. And so I think I use data as a localization tool, and then data from, the other side is testing the data, testing the emails, seeing what's working. And then I often, we have organizers come to us all the time that want to launch a Twitter storm or whatever, and we'll walk them through the process. Like, why do you think that's going to work? Why do you think this target cares? Say it's Peabody Coal, and we want them to retire a coal plant. I don't think they care what we say on Twitter. They'll lose a lot of money. They don't care. So going through that process and thinking, okay, what do you know about this target? What do you know that they care about? How do you know, they care about their shareholders, right? Well, what can we do with that? And then testing it. Okay, let's try that and see if there's an impact. I launched a campaign a month ago. Got a lot of news, which was fun for me. Mark Zuckerberg and a lot of his friends launched this organization called Ford.us, and they started running anti-environmental ads, and we didn't like it. So we launched this thing, and it was very much like, let's try this, and let's see what reaction we get. Okay, we got this. Now we know we have new information. Let's iterate. So the campaign itself was iterative. And I think that's an important element that a lot of people miss when they design whatever you're doing, whether it's an issue in your community or if it's something larger.
No, I mean, in my capacity, in my job, we don't do policy at all, so kind of boring in that regard. I'm more focused on empowering campaigns to do what you're talking about, and with the having the tools and that sort of thing and the resources to be able to look at data. The one thing I would say about as far as data as it relates to predicting people's voting patterns is that really the biggest things are their voting history, their age, their gender, and basically that's it. So it's there's a lot of other data points that will help certainly, and there's people that are a lot smarter than I am that look at that kind of thing and try to figure out the formula. But that's kind of where I draw the line.
Yeah, I would recommend thinking about return on investment. It's a big ROI is a big term in the tech world, but it's really good in everything. How much energy am I putting in? How much investment am I putting in, and what am I getting back? So if you're going to do all that data and you're going to add spend 100 hours on that other stuff and it's slightly better, probably not worth doing.
Okay, question from the back.
Okay, I have one last question. Okay, maybe this is perception, but it seems like the left has done a really good job of sharing data. The right, we don't want to share anything. The campaigns don't share with the other campaign, the groups, the policy groups. So I want to hear about, open access. I know nobody wants to give away their donor list, okay, but how about just some lists so that everybody in this room can start getting busy, So where's it going?
Yeah, I think certainly there's data trust, and Liberty Works is working on a giant database to share down to all the campaigns and that sort of thing. I think what you're saying is right, and part of the reason why the Democrats have been there's this perception of them just being so superior in that space, and it's because people aren't sharing. You have these primaries that happen, and then the data just kind of goes and dies on the vine. It's not okay, hey, we lost, but here's our email list. We've already culled this, and we have this, and here are our donors or whatever. That's not happening. And I think it will eventually. But again, I keep saying paradigm. That's what it is. People are just very set in their ways, and it's hard to get change, and it's hard to get people to think differently about these kind of things. Yes, I think sharing data is a very important part of this, a very important building block. And I hope that it continues on the path that it's going, where it looks like that's actually going to be something that's going to be possible, where we actually do share data with everybody. But there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of distrust and that sort of thing. So it's just, we'll see what happens. I think that the pieces are in place though, and the need is there, and it's happening at the grassroots level, and it's happening at the top levels as well.
Okay, we'll take one more question, a brief one from the room, and let's go with this hand right there in the blue shirt. Okay, the question was to readdress the iterative process and to do that in a way that it does not appear you are flip-flopping on issues.
Yeah, well, I'm fortunately not a politician, and I've never had to explain any changes of opinion. I think they're like, I evolved, or the situation, I don't know what they say. It's on both sides. New information available. I think that, a couple of things. If you're representing an organization, what are your organization's values, these broad principles, and then you can iterate from a policy perspective. You can iterate the solutions as you get new data. Why wouldn't you? Why would you think that something that made sense to an organization in the 1950s is still the solution in 2013? You should iterate. You should get new information. You should learn. You can have principles. This is the kind of country I want. But this is how I think we can get there. We learn new things, and on both sides, there's always policy things are changing, but they're also, I think both sides of Republican Party first, and then this was one of the areas that the Democrats had to get better at, is how to talk about their values. They were terrible at it, didn't want to talk about it, and now there's a lot more of that. But they put these kind of broad values, and then how they apply it can change. Like I said, I apply this methodology to everything I do in my social, my political life, and I think it's a value. But that's as an individual. I think that Sierra Club recently came out and endorsed Pathway to Citizenship. And it's kind of broad, and it's an environmental group, and it was definitely a different issue. And they told a story where they connected their values to why this matters. And I think it's always that part. But they changed. They got new information. They changed their mind, whatever it is. And Sierra Club, like a lot of organizations, is grassroots democratic. People, whatever the membership is what they do, And so the membership changed and voted this new thing. So I think it just depends. If that's helpful.
How can folks find out, just in 30 seconds, find out more about what the RSLC is and what it does?
Sure, rslc.com, and just to briefly wrap it up, we're 4 caucuses. We focus on state legislative races, attorneys general, lieutenant governors, and secretary of state. We actually just launched our 5th caucus earlier this week in Austin, Texas, and it's called the Future Majority Caucus. Ed Gillespie's our chairman, and this is kind of a project that he's really focused on working on. And it's to reach out to more diverse candidates and more women candidates to run for office. So I encourage you to look at rslc.com, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here. And I appreciate it, and thank you for your kindness.
Thanks so much. Please give a warm round of applause. He literally has to run for his points. Okay, and Michael, I'd like to give you 1 minute to talk about, if you could, maybe 2 minutes to talk about NetSquared, because it's something you're very active in, and I think might interest some of the folks in this room. And also, just before we all run out of this room, please give a warm round of thanks for Michael Grenetz for coming into Daniel and Lions Day.
So NetSquared, really quick, is it's an international organization based out of an organization called TechSoup Global, which works with a lot of tech companies like Microsoft and others to sell software licenses like Windows, whatever, Microsoft Office, at very cheap rates at any type of nonprofit in the world. And this other project that there's NetSquared is about a place that brings together people who work in technology, people who are socially do-gooders, and NGOs and nonprofits together so that they can work on things they want to work on. That we have a strong belief there's an incredible amount. Look at this area that we live in. How close are we to a lot of huge companies that are doing amazing things? We have an incredible amount of social capital in technology. We're not using it. That there's things that they can help us solve and things they can do for organizations, whatever that is. And we believe strongly that getting these folks together is really important. So we have monthly meetings, mostly in Seattle specifically, and you're all welcome to attend, to be part of it, to suggest trainings that you'd like. We also do a monthly, every other month we usually do a mixer. It's a lot more fun, but the trainings are good. I'm actually going to be part of the training. We have a couple of folks from Yes Magazine, and then myself talking about how to use social media to generate media attention, whatever your purpose of your organization is. And so it's for the whole community, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come here. I mean, it's not a political thing. I think everyone should have access to stuff to be empowered on the things they care about. That's what it's all about. So anyway, thanks for the time, and I really enjoyed meeting you.
Okay.
So just Google NetSquared Greater Seattle, and we have a meetup that you can join.